I'm going to use discretion as to how much I'm going to allow because this is going to stay focused on the multi-use trail comments. I'd ask that you keep those comments brief, 2 to 3 minutes, and
I think that there's a very pleasant side to the multi-trail system, but there's also a dark side, and I represent that because of my personal experience. And I think first, my mother bought a property at what is now 919 Granville Road. She bought this in the early 1950s and bought 10 acres. In the 1960s then, the Army Corps of Engineers took 5 acres of that, and my mother was compensated somewhat for that. But that's not real fair market value. But that's not the point. The point is, when she passed away in 1990, I inherited the property. And as far as I knew, there were 5 acres there. We'd never had trouble with vandalism, with trespassing, crime of any sort, all those years. After the bike trail had gone in, kind of laterally to the property, I thought, I got up one morning to go to work, my car had been stolen out of my garage. Can I prove that that's because of the bike trail? Of course I can't, but given all those years there were no problems. You could only surmise that that was the case. I decided at that point, living alone, not getting any younger, I needed to sell the property. And so I put it on the market in 2004, and a problem came up with a prospective buyer, and I was forced to have it surveyed. I did that, and in finding what I did, I realized that the Evans Foundation had in fact stolen 2 acres of my property. When the diversion ditch had gone through, it bisected the 5 acres that was left. So there were actually 2 acres on the west side of the diversion ditch. In Ohio, there's a statute of limitations on adverse possession, and that's 21 years. And we were probably already 11 years into that before I found this out. So needless to say, that affected me personally. It affected the sale of my property immensely.
My name is Judy Kaufmeyer. I live at 29 Roman Court in Etna. And I'm here speaking on behalf of Carol Cormican. She is a landowner in Licking County and was deeply affected by the bike path system. She couldn't be here today because of a doctor's appointment, having surgery. And I will take her words because it is 5 minutes. But she hand wrote this entire document because she felt it important for you to hear her story as well. Now, you're all familiar with the fact that she did go through a lawsuit with a couple of her neighbors, but the rail system that runs through her property and her son's property, and that when Give Grease purchased from the foundation, that the bill of sale, so he purchased all that the railroad owned. Well, what the railroad owned were the rails and the ties, not the property, because she continues to pay taxes on that property. So, and even though it has now become a bike path. So the rails and ties then were sold overseas for many thousands of dollars. So that was someone profited. It says, look at the profiteering that is taking place in the implementation of bike paths. So, and just that some of the finagling that is going on. And also that Mrs. Cormican, her husband, was a Licking Township trustee. And at the time when the original bike path came out, Licking, and they said no to and they sent letters. He and Phil Lynn sent letters to the folks around there, and they said, no, please don't do this. And so there were also, people that had some issues with that, and feels like there was some graft money that was taken. And finally, wanted to quote Jay Hodinger, because this was printed in the Advocate on December 20th of 2007, and very apropos to being private property. Private property has been the backbone of the American wealth system of our country Our westward expansion was spurred in part by the lure of free or low-cost land. The largest investment most families will ever make is the purchase of their own home. To pay for the investment, most of us take out a mortgage on the property, and if the property loses value, that wealth evaporates at the same time. It's been said that bike paths are an attribute to someone's property. These are Carol Cormican's words. The bike path has done nothing to improve my property.
Hi, I'm Sarah Chalk, and I know I've spoken before you before, and I appreciate another opportunity to voice my objection. On the path that borders my property, since we last met here, on April 19th of this year, a 54-year-old man on a racing bike was, in his words, fiddling with his radio, with his earphones on, and he wasn't watching. Evidently, a huge tree had fallen in the previous 48 hours right across the pathway in clear sight for a full quarter mile in either direction. He hit the tree at full speed. His bike stopped, but he flipped over the tree. 2 life squads came from St. Albans Township. This is on April 19th. It was Easter weekend. His injuries were an obliterated collarbone, 5 broken ribs, a collapsed lung. He spent 7 days in Grant Hospital with surgery. Since I have a photo here showing you this, and I have searched diligently for an article in the paper discussing this accident, and I find it strange there was no article, there was nothing in squad runs, there was nothing. Makes me wonder how many more injuries or incidents are happening on our bike paths, reported and unreported. Interestingly, 2 years ago, a similar accident happened where that bike trail crosses the lane that reaches our property. There's a stop sign posted for the cyclists to stop to allow the vehicles the right of way. A pickup truck was leaving our property slowly, and a bicyclist broadsided the truck at full speed. The cyclist was evidently not looking ahead along the trail, just racing with his head down like they do. Good thing he didn't hit somebody walking a dog. That stop sign on our driveway is routinely disregarded, and so we always proceed with caution as we cross the path. I spoke with Parks and Recs after that accident in 2012, asked for a speed bump, and were advance warning signs of this vehicular crossing. They came out to inspect the area, and they said they'd get on it, and that was 2 years ago. Attached here, and I'll give you the list, I have a list of incidents that have been reported to have occurred on the Lincoln County bike trails in the Newark Advocate. But I personally know of 5 incidents happening right in front of us that were never reported to the public. A cow was killed by maintenance negligence. Livestock gates were opened by vandals allowing cattle to roam free. Dogs running loose and threatening runners. Cyclists hitting a pickup truck and a man hitting a tree. The T.J. Evans Trail was built several decades before our family moved to Lincoln County. The trail looked innocuous enough, and after living with the trail for 10 years now, it has become a source of concern to me and my family. The man from whom we bought the property, we found out later, was in a serious fight with the foundation over the creation of this path atop the abandoned rail bed that had been paying him for an easement through this property. The path split his 35-acre farm into 2 separate parcels, and we live on part of that land now. I know that Evans paid him little for that confiscation, but thankfully it was to his benefit and now to ours to be free of the worry of liability for accidents such as this. Other residents nearby actually own the property that the bike trail runs across, and the easement arrangement has been demanded by the T.J. Evans Foundation. It's a nightmare to figure out any of the ownership, liability, property tax situations along this trail. But it is a job that must be done by those who are pushing this trail expansion. Show us the plat maps, show us the deeds. Interestingly, a new natural gas line was put through our property in 2013 with our permission to service a nearby business. But it was a real puzzle for them to figure it out. Knox Energy had a heck of a time establishing the location of the bike path easements to avoid running the line within the easements. It took them weeks, at least 3 weeks, to determine along each parcel where they could and could not install the bike path, or the pipeline, But we now know that none of this was ever a concern for the foundation and its director, Mr. Reese. In 2007, in the Newark Advocate, he was quoted, "On the Newark to Granville path, we did some of the title examination and it was just such a pain and it was so expensive. I said, let's not do it. Let's just build it." Well, this path is not just a nuisance, it's a liability, for heaven's sake. In this litigious society, who will be sued for malfeasance? That tree that fell and created a hazard near us was within the T.J. Evans Foundation's property. Can they be sued? Would the township be sued? Or if the tree had just fallen down the path from me on my neighbor's property, would that poor citizen be sued simply because the Evans Foundation and the bureaucrats of Licking County forced this path on them? If lawsuits haven't yet been filed, maybe the next time. Cows roam loose on the private property from trespassers arriving via the bike path. Assaults on the unlighted path are happening at midnight. What are they doing there? Who is monitoring it? This path runs through rural, wooded, secluded areas, and it's impossible to surveil. Lawsuits are inevitable, and we taxpayers will pay those legal fees. So I suggest you interview current residents living along the path, not bicycle enthusiasts, not sports clubs, not public servants. You need to talk with folks like us before you lay down one bucket of asphalt. I should have a vote on this.
Oh, I'm sorry, Nancy Channel. I live at 1225B Paidew Trail. And I do live near the bike path, and I do use it occasionally, and I appreciate that. And I think Newark probably has enough bike paths. So I won't read this word for word, but I will go down. I've underlined some things because of the time strain and everything. But I don't know whether you really realize the burden that you are putting on taxpayers by wanting this fancy new bike path and everything. Do you realize what the taxpayers are having to do? The sacrifices that we are having to make because of the added taxes from everybody? Our cost of living is going up on everything. Everything we buy is cost of living going up. Everybody wants new taxes, the federal. We're going to be paying new taxes on health care and the green energy stuff, and everything is hitting us with new taxes and constantly tax increases. We just had on the ballot 2 taxes, and I think they both failed. How do you think people are going to vote on a new tax for the bike path? And it will happen. The bike path has got roads and bridges and everything like regular roads does. It's all going to need work. It needs work right now. I've been told and read. There's many places on the bike path that needs to be fixed and repaired. You know, last year, the county commissioners voted to increase our conveyance fee from $2 per thousand to $3 per thousand. So now when we sell our home on a $100,000 home, we have to pay $300 fee for that. That $100 there was a new fee. They increased the license fee, the vehicle license fee for $5. There's another tax. I read where state funding has been cut by the state government. So this is also hurting local governments, that local governments are going to have to come up with more money. Is that another tax increase? And you know, the roads and bridges here are deteriorating. We read in the paper all the time. There's going to have to be new taxes for roads and bridges. Who's going to pay for those? We are. And that's taking money out of the taxpayers' pocket that they are feeding their kids with and everything. I read where we need, the Lazier has stated that they need an additional $4.6 million annually to keep up with repairs and maintenance on the county's 419 bridges and 421 road miles. Rehabilitating only the 79 bridges in poor condition would cost $9.77 million. Who's going to pay for all of this? You know, we know there's going to have to be tax increases on all of that. So, and the two things that was just on the ballot, they didn't pass. People are tired of taxes. If people wanted to pay more taxes, they would have passed these two past the Licking County Board of Development, Disabilities, and the Conservation. They don't have the money. And I know a couple years ago, the Park Department tried to get a tax passed. It took 7 times on the ballot to get it passed. What's that tell you? People don't have the money. And then I'm constantly hearing from this committee that grant money, that there's grant money going to be used for that, and that we don't have to pay that back. Well, I mean, it's free money. What does it do, fall out of the sky? It's free money, it must fall out of the sky. No, it will be added to our $17 trillion debt, borrowed from another country, and our grandkids are going to pay it back. Can you look your grandkids in the eye and say, I want this bike path, and you are going to pay for it? How do you think they're going to feel when they don't have money to even feed their own families? The scariest part about this is the elected politicians or unelected bureaucrats that seems to think they can make the decision for everybody else, and that doesn't matter, that it's hurting other people. So, you know, I read where you had made the statement that when gas got expensive, people would be using the bike path to get to work and everything. Well, how many of you have rode your bikes to work yet? The gas is $400, good for you. Did you ride it though when the temperatures were 0 and the bike path was full of ice and snow? I bet you didn't. You know, so people are not going to be using the bike path like that all the time. And you said that poor people get exercise. You know what? The YMCA has a good program. I go there all the time. I bet we could get these people a program at the YMCA. It would be a lot cheaper than putting in new bike paths and maintaining them. I think we need to look first at what's most important. That's our roads and the bridges, and that need to be repaired and taken care of, and not worry about a bike path. Every time you put a new tax on somebody, that is taking money out of their pocket, and it's taking money away from their family to live on and everything else. I think people have to wake up to what taxes really are doing to the individual. I'm sure our founding fathers did not believe that a bike path was necessary to put taxes on people. Thank you.
I use the word bike path, I mean multimodal path. Forgive me in advance, if you would, please. Secondly, our belief is that
Will you identify yourself?
I need to roll 1252 Refugee Road. And thank you very much for this time in advance of the vote. Although I really think that this conversation should have happened before the bike path draft was even considered to be created. All right. These bike paths are non-critical infrastructure. Roads and bridges are critical infrastructure. Our roads and bridges are not in good shape, and therefore you should put your money towards the things that draw economic development. And when a company comes to Licking County, the first thing they look at is, do you have good roads and bridges? They way down the line will go, oh, and do you have a bike path? It's just not on the top level of things. So I ask you, I don't care if it's a drop in the bucket. Drops in buckets make buckets. That argument is used all the time, and I'm tired of it, frankly. Okay, now I'm going to talk directly to the bike path draft. I read every single word of it. I find it just a non-ingenuous, I find it a disingenuous article in many ways. As I said, I don't believe the bike paths stimulate the economy in a significant way. If nothing else, my husband took his bike up to Lake Erie. Somebody else might have come here from Lake Erie to ride, but it's a net zero gain. So no, it's not like there's going to be a flood of people to Licking County to use your bike paths. Everybody these days, because of the federal government's mandates to do what you're doing, they're mandating every county and every state to do the same thing. You are not going to be unique. Then, I was really offended. I read it in the original Advocate article, I read it in the bike path article, and it's offensive to when Captain Riley of Newark Police said, if the crime hadn't happened on the bike path, it would have happened somewhere else. That's just such an insensitive statement. It's off the charts. Crime occurs where there's opportunity. There are many miles of bike paths that go through unpopulated, unlighted areas that provide a perfect opportunity for ne'er-do-wells to cause trouble. If you need an example of that, LCATS provides a perfect example on page 12 of the draft, where they talk about their camouflage infrared counters that they wanted to put up for a significant number of months. They were camouflaged. Within a few months, they were stolen. What if you had a home along those bike paths? What if you had kids out there to play? Would you feel safe with strangers going by when you are perhaps the only house for miles? You know, or your property that's exposed? You know, I have talked to people too, just like Sarah has, and they give me these same stories about problems with the bike path and your safety and your security. You know, so please just think about this. There's nothing simple about a bike path. I think it's a great intention. But remember, the road to hell was paved on good intentions. Good intentions is not good enough. Then the whole idea that lots of people are using these bike paths and we should add more bike paths using the data from the bike path, 78,000 commuters in Lincoln County. Of that, if you add the walkers, which are 786, and you add the 804 that use some other means, even then, and those other means may not be bike paths on how they get to work, but that's still only 2% of the population that at least sometimes use the bike paths. Although again, likely half the year in Ohio, it's raining, it's snowing, it's just not weather that you even want to be outside, let alone pedaling in a bike. So you've got 2% of the population sometimes using this bike path, and we're going to spend millions and millions of dollars and likely increase the burden on the taxpayer because there'll be more to maintain, so you've got to increase taxes to maintain these extra bike paths. All to perhaps move us up to 3%. That's just not good use of funds. Then on page 10 of the draft, it makes such a big point about how important it is for the path user that these paths be really lovely and well maintained, so those good multimodal folks find it a happy place and safe place to be. And yet we've got a bridge in Lincoln County, or a road over in Pataskala that just washed out. Bridges in Lincoln County that aren't safe. How do you want the people driving? Are you that concerned about them? Because God knows you appear to be terribly concerned about the multimodal folks. Okay? There were 420 survey takers. 425 survey takers talk about not much percentage-wise. That's like nothing in a county with this population. And they were almost all, if you look on your bike path thing, the people that are behind that draft and contributed to that draft, a significant number of them have their finger in the bike economy. They are bikers, they are bike shops, they are those folks. We are the citizens. We have a right to speak. We pay your salaries. And yet we're told you get this. I appreciate we have this time, but we should have this time. Do you know that what's wrong with this country is very few of us step up to do this? And then when we step up to do this, we're told, no, we're not perfect. Everything we say we may not be right. But dear God, have you ever tried to get information when you're on the outside? We worked our tails off to try to get information, to try to help you understand that there's nothing simple about a bike path. So I sincerely ask that you put this bike path on hold and you get a survey out to all the people along the bike path and you ask them what they think. If you had real data from real people that just didn't want to bike, I could back off of this. If you'd taken it to the citizens and had them vote on it, I could back off of this. But this is rigged. This is rigged. I know you're nice people. I hope you didn't want to rig this. But this is not set up properly. Not to get real data. I was a science teacher. Data rules. You ain't got it.
Forgive me, my name is Anna Rio. I live at 1293 Granville Road in Newark. I wasn't able to attend the last meeting because I was out of town, but so I did want to be here, and I did want to let you know that I have a lot of concerns. And the reason that I am here this morning is because of the cost of the proposed bike paths multi-use. Please forgive me when I also say bike paths, and how they are funded and why the bike path seems to have a higher priority of importance other than the roads and the bridges. Now, to learn more, I attended the LCATS meeting on April 23rd, and I spoke to two gentlemen, Mr. Newton, and there was a gentleman there that was from T.J. Evans Foundation. He was there on behalf of someone for T.J. Evans Foundation. I spoke to them. They were very kind. They took some time with me to explain the plans for this bike path. But when the subject of financing came up, both assured me that no grants were involved, that private funds and the Evans Foundation would be providing the backing of these additional paths. I decided to do some research, so I went to the Newark Advocate archives and found articles regarding the funding of bike paths. I stopped looking after I found 17 of many dated from September 2003 to January 2004, covering the funding of the bike paths. It covered Newark, Heath, Granville, and Pataskla. I'll only include a partial of what I discovered. Now these are facts from the newspapers. The September 07 Advocate article discussed the proposed $460,000 pedestrian bike bridge over Raccoon Creek next to the South Main Street Bridge, which would be the first step in a plan to build a safer crossing of South Main on the bike path and to tie the path to the river road in downtown. The article went on to say that the village council adopted a resolution authorizing the village manager to apply for a $350,000 Ohio Public Works Commission grant to build a 6 to an 8 foot wide bridge. And the village would contribute $110,000 of that money. Now to October of 13, the Advocate reported, quote, a recreational trails program grant of $150,000 has been added to the kitty as a realization of a 4-year legacy project goal by the Granville Rotary Club finally nears. The Ohio Department of Natural Resources said Monday it has approved the grant that will help raise the local 20% match of a $1.06 million pedestrian bridge crossing Raccoon Creek between Raccoon Valley Park and T.J. Evans Bike Path. The Ohio Department of Transportation has already committed 80% of the cost of the bridge, with the latest funding of $1,993 in grant funds is now available to cover the anticipated $1,063,742 cost of the project, unquote. Apparently, if Granville's any indication, grant money, not private money, is funding these constructions of the bike paths. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about Heath. In September of 07, there were articles of the following. The city of Heath is one step closer to connecting its bike path to the county trails system after winning an almost $400,000 transportation enhancement grant from ODOT. Heath again in 08 took another grant, in this case to construct a tunnel under East Irving Wick Drive. The cost of ODOT project was estimated to be $406,946, and the city's share is about $20,000. Evans Foundation donated, and an ODOT grant paid for most of that cost, the $20,000. If you do the math, that means that the Evans Foundation contributed a whole 5% of the cost, while the taxpayer share was 95%. Now I could go on, but and talk a little bit more about the articles that I read, but I want to summarize exactly what these 17 articles showed me in dollars. Estimate total cost of the current bike path was $6,463,688. Grants received, $4,410,822. Cost to the cities, $1,468,744. T.J. Evans contributed $160,000. In other words, grants paid for by the taxpayers covered about 65% of the cost of the bike paths, while the Evans Foundation provided about 2.5%. Now, it makes a citizen wonder, it made me wonder, why Evans Foundation gets so much credit and control over the bike paths construction process, while the citizens get absolutely no input into whether they think this kind of money should be spent on the bike paths, rather than, let's say, critical infrastructure like deteriorating roads and bridges. I was also wondering if the money that was contributed by the Evans Foundation might also been obtained by the foundation applying for grants, which then reallocated that money back to the bike paths. It also makes a citizen wonder why LCATS seems so determined to downplay the use of grants in the funding of bike paths. Could it be because LCATS understands that grants are indeed not free money, and that by taking federal grants, the federal deficit continues to be inflated, or that by taking state grants, it makes it even less likely that the governor will ever return to local government the local government funds, which could have been used to repair our roads and bridges. After all, if the local government funds are taken by the state and feds and then fed back to the local government with strings attached, the local governments are forced to do the bidding not of the local citizen, but the state and federal. I believe this qualifies as taxation without representation. That's something for you to think about, please. So, all in all, the taxpayers are being burdened with the cost of the building and maintaining the bike paths, while the Evans Foundation gets all the credit and control. I suggest if you honestly care about maintaining representative government, or care that you are literally stealing money out of the citizens' wallets, that you put this on the ballot and give the voters a chance to vote their opinion. If they vote in favor of the bike path, then let's consider naming it the taxpayers' bike path, or multi-use plan, whatever. And give credit where credit is due. Remember, nothing is free, and I encourage you all to be diligent and understanding the grants that you accept today and how it will affect our future. Thank you.